ToolCase, the retail banking industry's preferred choice for real-time risk management and fraud detection.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Fraudcast. This is Sam Piccolotti, VP of Business Development at ToolCase. Joined again by my friend and co-host, Brett Johnson, keynote speaker, consultant, cybercrime expert, and formerly one of the U.S. most wanted cybercriminals, reformed. Brett Johnson, good to see you again.
Sam, it's great to see you again, man. How you been doing?
I'm good. We've been active. We've been busy, as you know. The world of fraud has just exploded. So that's been good for us at ToolCase, and we're broadly and widely expanding our RembrandtAi product and doing our best to help defend the financial institutions that we serve across the industry.
Right.
But yeah, things have been good.
Yeah, I'm hearing good things about ToolCase, man. I like a lot of things you guys are doing right now.
I appreciate it. We haven't gotten together in a while, and man, I want to catch up because there's been a lot happening in your world, pretty exciting stuff. I want to ask you about the Jordan Peterson interview and podcast. That was look, I know your story. We met, if you recall. I don't remember the year. I think it had to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2017, maybe
17, 18, somewhere through there.
Yeah. In New York City at an ISMG conference. You were speaking there, and you were gracious enough to come out and speak at a ToolCase conference that we held the following year.
Right.
So it's been a while, but your career has certainly expanded, taken off. You've offered so much value and insight to the industry. Still offer on a regular basis value and insight to the industry. I know your work with law enforcement, the contributions you made there. But I want to talk about that Jordan Peterson interview, because as much as I've gotten to know you and know your story, what I'm curious about is, did you expect him to open you up the way he did?
So I had just gotten through doing Robert Hanson's show as who I just gotten through recording. And I was on the plane, had landed in Houston, I think, something like that. I forgot the airport I'd landed at. When I landed, I had a message. That was a Friday. I had a message from Jordan Peterson's crew asking, "Hey, can you come in Monday and do the show?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'd love to. Yes, let's do that." So before I got there, I flew in on a Sunday afternoon to Arizona. That's where we filmed. And I had made up my mind, Jordan Peterson, one of the top psychologists on the planet, I'm going to get me some therapy. And so I don't know.
Sunday and Monday?
Yeah, I had, as soon as I was like, you know what, I've done Lex Friedman, I've done these other big shows as well. And the thing about Jordan Peterson is he is that psychologist. So I wanted to, I've told you that before too. When I'm on a stage or on a show, I try to find out more about who I am. That's what's important to me. So talking to him, that was the idea going in. I don't know if that was his idea, but my idea going in, I'm going to get some therapy today. And I did. It was oftentimes very uncomfortable therapy, but it was beneficial. And I love the man. I think he's a great human being. He's very skilled with what he does. You saw the show, and I sat there for 7 minutes before I got the opportunity to say anything, because he was talking about the dark triad and sociopaths and things like that. And you talk about being uncomfortable. That was me right there. But yeah, I loved it, and I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to talk to the man.
Yeah, it's really interesting because he's so pragmatic about the psychology, and he just pried the can open without in a very pragmatic way, but it offered a lot of insight, I'm sure, to many listeners and myself included. But it, as you had just mentioned, and that's what I wanted to ask about, certainly seemed to bring insight to you as well through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get
skilled guy, and great interview. If people haven't listened to it, go out and find it on YouTube. It was a great show, and kudos to you for standing up through that.
no, thank you. And if you do watch it on YouTube, for anyone out there listening, it ends about 4 minutes early because, of course, Jordan Peterson is partnered with, I think, the Daily Show or Daily Wire. Daily Wire is what it is. So if you want the last 4 minutes of that interview, it's on that platform. But you get the meat of it. The last 4 minutes is basically saying hi, bye, and going from there.
Yeah, it was a great show. So what's happening lately?
What's happening lately? Well, I've been doing these shows I've been doing podcasts of my own since 2018, something like that. The interesting thing is a buddy of mine, Tim Leonard, he runs security for the Commercial Bank of Texas. He told me several years ago, he was like, Brett, you're doing too much. You're going to burn out. You don't have time for anything else. And I didn't listen to him then. But what I decided yesterday, and as a matter of fact, I went ahead and did that. All of my YouTube and podcasts are going dark for probably 6 months because I need the time to finish my book. And I've been I told you before we started to record, I tend to have on a yearly basis I'll have 3 or 4 different television or film production companies that'll reach out to me and they're very interested. Then they go out and they try to shop some sort of scam related show around, and all the TV show channels, they really like the Brett Johnson character, but they also hate the scam world because there's no money in that on television. So I have those talks, and then I have talks fairly frequently about someone ghostwriting my book. I had Frank Wyman at one point. He was my literary agent. He's the guy who's responsible for October Sky, The Irishman. Recently, I've been represented. I am still represented by United Talent, and the ghostwriter that they've got pegged right now is Matt Baglio, who wrote Argo. But again, there's not been the way that book has been put forth to publishers has been as a cybercrime or a hacking type of story, and that's not really the story. So I've decided to just go ahead and close my shows down, give me time enough to write the book myself. And to me, it's a story about a guy who, excuse my language, but a guy who's went through the shit and was able to find redemption at the end. And excuse me as I get a little emotional about that. You started talking about Peterson. I always get emotional remembering that, and then we add that in there, and it's get a little emotional about that. So I'm sorry about that.
No, it's good. I know the story from talking to you and from interviews, and I think the book certainly would be of great value to be centered around that. So I wish you luck in that endeavor.
Thank you.
Hey, one of the things that I really wanted to tap you today on with some insight. Our client base is financial institutions across the U.S., and man, fraud has just exploded.
Yeah.
The pandemic, I look back and, banks and financial institutions, credit unions like that may have had advancements in digital banking offerings on the back burner, got thrust forward.
Sure.
Because they could not get customers into their branches. So they had to find another way to be able to transact. And that brought, a large and robust priority to move those digital banking products and solutions, if you will, forward. But since then, the bad actors have just had a field day in taking advantage of all that digital enterprise, if you will.
Right.
And I look back at some statistics the other day, and look, the trajectory is horrible, right? I mean, if you look at what's going on today in fraud, we've seen a resurgence in check fraud and things that just haven't existed in banks that it may have been around, but not to the complexity and the extent that they are today. So, my financial institution clients and those that I talk to when I'm around speaking and meeting, with them around the U.S., it's a huge problem. We're just from a ToolCase perspective, we specialize in real-time analytics and fraud prevention, have since 1999. I'll be honest and tell you, 7-8 years ago, if I came to a financial institution and I pitched the the advantage of utilizing real-time technology, they'd be like, well, yeah, that sounds cool, but I don't know how much of a need it is. Boy, have things changed.
They have. They have.
They are clamoring for real-time capability and whatever automation they can get their hands around to be able to stop or mitigate and trot off some of these fraud attacks. But what you and I had spoken about this, and I've heard you talk about it many times before in the construct of how the cybercrime or financial crime, in that matter, works, and it's beyond financial crime in general, but in financial crime, very seldom do you find one individual who has all the skill sets to be able to perpetrate and monetize the crime.
Right.
And if you look back, I think I saw a statistic from Experian the other day that in like the past decade or something, there have been 40,000 data breaches. I think last year there were over 3,600. I just saw one of your posts on LinkedIn not too long ago that talked about the Federal Trade Commission and a breach there. One of the things I try to explain to clients when I'm out talking to them is that, you've seen these breaches. There have been tens of thousands of them over the years. And a lot of very critical PII, right? Social security numbers, date of birth, driver's license information, et cetera, all the things they need to be able to take over identity and accounts and commit these types of crime. When that information is exposed and it is acquired and it hits the dark web medium, if you will, just because there's a class action lawsuit or somebody settled on it doesn't mean the data goes away.
Right.
So talk to me a minute, and the folks that are listening, about the impact of these data breaches. And I want to get into a little bit on theories on what you think is happening, but the impact of that to not just consumers, but financial institutions.
So what's interesting, and I like to take that overall picture of things. It's been about 3 weeks ago. I was talking to a reporter from New Yorker magazine, and she asked me, we were talking about one of these individuals that I helped to get arrested last year. I assisted in like 300 different fraudsters being arrested. One of them, bigger name, young kid, had just a golden career in front of him. He was very bright. He came from a well-to-do family, and that's important to remember, a well-to-do family. But he chose to engage in fraud on Telegram, got caught, and now his future is kaput. And the question was, because this has been coming up over and over again, especially recently in the news, and I've been thinking about it as well. The question is well, why would a young man who really didn't need the money, had a solid, promising, very lucrative career in front of him, why would they decide to just give that up and engage in fraud? And I think that it's important to understand that today, when I was committing fraud, I was the guy who was responsible for bridging the Ukrainians and the English-speaking worlds together. The Ukrainians were very, very talented attackers. They were very sophisticated, but they did not really look forward to a career in crime. They engaged in crime because they did not have any other way to provide for themselves and their families. All right. Now that's in the mid to late 90s that happens. Today, it's not like that. Today, you have people who absolutely want to grow up to be fraudsters. And that's the question that came up is what is causing this shift where people think that fraud is okay? We've got the 30 under 30 at Forbes. There's been a whole ton of those people who have been indicted. You've got, these college kids who are at Stanford. I outed some a couple of months ago who were fraudsters, and they decided they wanted to try to open up their own anti-fraud company. So it's what has made fraud okay? Because if we can answer that, then we can start to understand part of the reason, not all, but part of the reason that fraud has exploded. And it has. I mean, if cybercrime were a country today, it would have the third largest economy on the planet. And just think about those numbers. When I was committing fraud, when Shadow Crew, the group that I ran, when we were shut down by authorities, we ended with 4,000 members. You fast forward to 2017, the largest criminal group online is Alphabay, 240,000 members. 2 more years later, 2019, just a dark web marketplace gets shut down. 1.15 million members. All of that pre-pandemic, by the way. Pandemic, what happens? Well, fraud explodes. It absolutely explodes. So you've got the ease of which fraud is committed, the making it where it's more or less cybercrime as a service these days. You've absolutely got that. But at the same time, I think society has been signaling to people that fraud is okay. You know, we see these corporations that engage in nefarious activities. We see these politicians that do the same thing. And I don't care what, political side you're on, but you see this, and I think it signals to people, it's kind of that trickle down thing. It signals that, hey, it's okay if you engage in this kind of stuff too. So, these numbers continue to explode. And at the same time, we've been raised as a society that is more concentrated on the individual than the collective. And, I support people being unique. I support people being their own person, but we have to get to the point where we start to understand that, okay, yeah, you can be an individual, but the reason that we're here on this planet is to help each other. It's not to simply try to, do you. And somehow we've gotten off the rails on that. But at the same time we're doing this, the dark web, the traditional dark web where you're using Tor to access it, that comes with a lot of friction. I gave a presentation yesterday talking to the Minneapolis ACFE, and I was talking about the same thing we're talking about now. You take the traditional dark web, it comes with friction. You have to know how to use it properly in order to succeed, in order to not be identified by law enforcement. You have to know where you're going. You have to have some degree of skill in order to engage in some of these crimes that are being committed or plotted on the traditional dark web.
Where are they learning those skills?
Well, it was on forums like Dread, or Archetype's got its own forum. You've even got surface web forums like, exploit.in, things like that. So you can learn from each other like that. The interesting thing is now you've got Telegram, and I've spoken about Telegram. We've spoken about Telegram, but Telegram has absolutely zero friction. It's an app you download to your phone. You can run it through a browser. It's encrypted end to end, so you don't have to have any skill on remaining safe. It's owned by a Russian who absolutely refuses to answer any subpoena requests for law enforcement. So they're pretty safe using that, as long as they don't talk too much, and a lot of them do. But the Telegram type of environment, and you mentioned this thing of it's never a single attacker, and it's not. It's online crime is an organized type of crime. It's never a single person that hits you or your organization. It's always a group of people working together. So Telegram makes that so much easier to do, because now you've got these groups of people. You go to the Telegram channel and you'll have advertisements about banks or PII being sold, or which banks to hit, or what have you. And then they work together in order to succeed. We had talked about check fraud before. Check fraud, where it happens is on Telegram. It's not happening on the dark web. You'll have some few people that will talk about it there, but the majority of it happens on Telegram channels. People working together, stealing checks, selling arrow keys, what have you, to gain access to the mail, and then they will sell it or partner with someone on Telegram to cash it out and profit and make money on that. It's just the ease of which things have been done. The ease of which cybercrime has became easier to commit over the years. It's the signals of society at large saying that, hey, fraud is okay. It's all these things that have resulted now to this almost tipping point of where fraud wins. You had mentioned RembrandtAi, and you told me that, hey, our program now, we actually take the initiative of coming in and acting. Instead of just signaling to the company, we can act on that information if the company wants us to do that. That's an amazing type of idea because, that crime is not 8 hours a day. Crime is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If I can profit when everyone else is asleep, that's what I did when I was committing tax identity return theft, tax return identity theft. I did the same thing. I knew that banks were not looking at these accounts over the weekend. So that's when I wanted to cash out at that point. So, if you've got an automated program that can do that for you, that can handle a lot of that load. And let's be honest, there are so many fraudsters out there now, so many criminals online that are looking to profit. You need a product that does that for you because you cannot do it manually anymore.
No, so that brings up an interesting topic. We're utilizing a proprietary AI solution, the RembrandtAi brand and product has a RembrandtAi component to the analytics. That does the work of hundreds of people being able to look at myriad amounts of data in real time, where it would take hordes and teams of individuals to do that.
Right.
Do you think we see the advent, the explosion really of AI in all kinds of applications? Do you think that AI, well, we know in some capacities it certainly is, but do you think AI is also being used and exploited from a bad guy's standpoint? How effective, I should say, do you think the bad guys are in utilizing AI to commit fraud?
Right now, it's not really effective. All right. And the reason being, right now, the only thing they really have, so a criminal does not create a product or service. They use an off-the-shelf product or service and then repurpose it for criminal activity. So what are they repurposing for criminal activity on the AI side? They're repurposing ChatGPT, an earlier version of that or something like that. So, and I've heard this argument for months now that, well, they're using ChatGPT. Now they're sending out phishing emails that don't have syntax errors and they look really good. Well, that problem had been solved a few years prior. Yeah, you still had some idiots that were doing that, but that you could tell by looking at the text that it was a phishing email, but most professional phishers had already solved that issue. So, I will say this, the chatter in criminal environments is huge about the potential of AI for criminal use. Okay, it's huge. They continue to bounce around ideas, hopes, and dreams, and what will happen when we finally get to the point when we're able to use it to victimize people. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
But the actual use of it right now is not widespread at all. You have it to a degree, but it's not enough to really base a company or product or a service to combat it on yet. Now, what I do think is going to happen, and I've said this before, I think that AI on the criminal side can absolutely help with a few things. It helps to so in order for me to victimize you, either as an individual or a company, I have to establish a degree of trust with that potential victim. If I can't get that potential victim to trust me, they're not going to give me information, access, data, or cash. So for an individual, if you're looking at, say, a romance scheme, pig butchering, what have you, that's a long-term scam. And what that requires is, right now, it requires a lot of human effort to layer trust to the point where that victim gives you not one payment, but every single penny that they've got. So I think that you'll see AI being used in chat types of sessions where a human being no longer has to have those conversations with the victim to get them to trust them. An AI chatbot will do that on their end for
them. That's a scary prospect.
That's a scary prospect. Yeah. For a company, how is trust established? If I'm looking to target a company, well, it's established by credentials. It's established by stolen PII. It's established maybe by browser fingerprints, by IP range, any number of things like that. Okay. So or even behavioral biometrics. It's a big one. So looking at that, how can AI assist a criminal in that endeavor? Well, it can certainly assist with behavioral biometrics. Absolutely. We've already seen that, as a matter of fact. We saw it a couple of years ago that somebody had set up a couple apps on the Google Play Store, had captured enough behavioral biometrics that they were able to launch bot attacks out, copy those behavioral biometrics, and it looked like they were human actors instead of bots that were doing the damage that was out there. So I think that we're going to see AI doing that. I also think that we'll see AI. We've got a huge problem with business email compromise. I think we'll see AI being used as in deep fakes. Now we're seeing that to a degree right now, but I think that once we get to the point where we've got real-time audio and video deep fakes, I think we're going to see a lot of damage being done. And you have to remember that attacks online aren't just cache-based. You've got three motivations for an online attack. You've got status, you're trying to impress your criminal peers. You've got cache, I'm looking to profit, but you've also got ideological types of attacks. Someone has a different political opinion or just whatever different opinion you've got, and they want to hurt you because of that. So you take a deep fake using that real time, the amount of damage that can be done, I think, is catastrophic. You think about the conflict over between Ukraine and Russia, for example. I saw a deep fake when the war first started over there of Zelensky saying we've surrendered. Okay, that was determined to be a deep fake pretty quickly. But what happens when it becomes real time? What happens when you've got a deep fake of Zelensky talking to CNN or talking to Fox News and giving an interview? We've given up. This is what's going on, and he's able to answer everything in real time. That becomes a very damaging prospect. Or you've got a CEO of a company saying, hey, we've sold, everything's going bad, FCC's investigating this, what have you. So, we're going to get to the point, and that's really one of my fears with deepfakes, is we have the potential of getting to the point where we are not able to trust anything that we see or hear. Now, you add all that together, and we talked about the explosion of fraud right now, and you mentioned RembrandtAi and that ability of going in and, hey, we instead of just flagging something for a human to act on, a financial institution can go ahead and tell RembrandtAi, hey, if it meets this criteria, lock the account right there. I think that is an absolute game changer, because that's exactly what's going to be needed. We are quickly getting past the point of being able to manually review everything that needs to be. If you're looking for a manual review to solve a problem, or even a machine to flag it for manual review, you're losing the game already. You truly are.
Yeah, it's we see it all the time, and unfortunately, from an industry perspective, the smaller financial institutions are still more manually functioned and operated. The good news is the technology is scalable.
Right.
You could bring it down to that level, but as we've mentioned, the impact today, from a fraud standpoint to financial institutions, is something that can't be ignored. I saw another statistic the other day that for every dollar lost to, I think this was the Lexis survey, for every dollar lost, the cumulative cost of fraud to that financial institution is something like $4.41.
Right.
What I'm seeing right now from an industry perspective, if you're a financial institution, you just came out of a period of lending, very robust lending at very low interest rates, below 3% on mortgages. And, consequently, many of those people still sitting tight on those. Banks and FIs make their money by lending. And they certainly need a certain amount of deposits to offset that from a balance sheet perspective to be able to continue to lend. So the focus, right, lend more. We're growing. We're trying to acquire more customers. You have to offer the ease and the convenience of mobile applications and digital
Right.
banking products in order to be able to keep customers and or members that they're not accustomed to walking into financial institutions anymore. They can do their business on the fly. They expect real-time capability and transfer funds. We have real-time payments, processing faster payments, embarking across the US now. So everything is so quick, so immediate, that the impact and the time to be able to intervene and provide analytics, good, efficient, effective analytics on a transaction cannot be done in human time.
You can.
It has
And
to be done in automated fashion.
And that's what's really interesting. When I spoke for you guys, and I still remember that invitation to Vail, and I loved every moment of it. But when I spoke to you guys, I talked about how a criminal operates in that gap of time. You've got from the time the account takeover happens to when it's identified is that gap where a criminal can profit. All right. And what we're seeing now, because of the advent of Telegram, because of the explosion of fraud, unless you really visit one of those environments, it's hard to really appreciate what I'm talking about, what you already know about. The explosion of the amount of people out there looking to defraud other people or companies. It really baffles the mind when you see it in real action. All right. But because of that, you've got so many people out trying to hit these companies that it's very difficult for human beings to come in. Even if you've got a machine learning platform or even an AI platform that's out there, if you've got one that's doing that's identifying a lot of the nefarious activities or flagging this stuff for a human to act on, it still takes time for that human to act on it. And during that time is when a criminal absolutely will profit, that gap. So when you're talking about, your all's product, RembrandtAi, that, hey, they can set it where Rembrandt will act for that. They will go ahead and lock that stuff down. That absolutely is a game changer, because you don't want any type of gap that a criminal can come in and defraud you with. Because once that's done, what they do is, one guy finds out it's successful, he goes back to his Telegram channel, he tells the other 100,000 members that are there, hey, this institution is wide open. And then all 100,000 of them come back, because everyone's PII is out there. They use someone's PII, come in, set up new accounts, use Money Mule accounts, what have you, and start eating you alive. You don't want that in your environment.
Yeah, we kind of take the approach. Look, you have to have a multi-layered approach to combating this stuff. You have to have something on the account opening side that is fairly competent at trying to identify synthetic IDs and account takeover type issues. But the fraud doesn't happen until a transaction occurs.
Right.
Now, I am hearing, and you may have some insight on this, that generally in these breaches and these types of situations, that these hackers or fraudsters will sit idle for maybe up to 6 months before they decide to strike. Is that fairly accurate from your?
So think about that. The longer that I'm able to stay in an environment without being identified, the more legitimate I look. Okay, that's whether I've committed an intrusion and sitting on a network. That's if I set up a brand new account. If I set up a brand new account and immediately try to commit fraud on that account, those things are not difficult to catch. All right, they're not. But if I open up an account and sit 6 months on that account, a little bit harder to identify at that point.
Yeah.
All right, and that's exactly the way that synthetic identities operate. So you set up a synthetic identity. If I were to set it up today, because you can set up one in 15, 20 minutes, you can have a credit score within a couple, 3 weeks. If I were to do that and immediately start committing fraud, I might make some money, but if I were to age that thing out, not only age that identity out, but start to layer other identities on top of that as well, that becomes a very difficult type of fraud scheme to identify. Really difficult. And you're right, the fraud doesn't happen until the transaction. You're absolutely right on that. But as soon as that transaction happens, you need to be aware of it. And the problem is that a lot of the times you're not, because of that sharing and exchanging of information in the criminal environment. They have tested things so many times through failure. They'll test, fail at it, come back out, try a different technique, try again, until something finally works. Then one of them sits down and says, okay, what made that work? What specifically made that work? So they'll test that to make sure that's exactly what happens. Then they'll share that with their own little crew, and then finally it will explode in the overall environment. And that's when things get really bad all of a sudden. So you don't want to wait to that point. You want to be able to identify as fast as possible. Preferably, you want to be able to start flagging these accounts before that fraud has even happened. Something is happening with this account. It's maybe it's the same device accessing multiple accounts within your institution. Maybe it's many different devices accessing the same account within an institution. Whatever that is. Maybe it's different IP ranges, or we're seeing whatever those anomalies are. But you want to be able to identify that, and that way you've got it flagged so that when that transaction does happen, it's acted upon immediately.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the ToolCase RembrandtAi approach. We sit on top of that collective data, run the analytics. Now with the power of AI, we can find those patterns, or AI can find those patterns, and then apply automated action.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where financial institutions have taken industry kind of legacy approaches in managing things. They're relying on, and I think it has its place. I hear it all the time: education. But the sophistication of these phishing attacks,
right?
and it's nonstop. I get them on my phone, almost on an hourly basis today. They're hitting you on every platforms.
Right.
So as much as you hope to educate your consumer base, you can't rely, I think, to almost any extent on that being effective.
I would not rely at all on it, at all.
Well,
in my presentations, I've got, for the business email compromise section that I talk about, I show a couple of emails, and they're Gollum at Anglerfish, and Gollum at Anglerfish is what it is. And I ask people to identify, can you see the difference between the two? And the only difference is one of the emails doesn't have a dot above an I. That's it. All right. So, and I say, that's not I don't really care about how much cybersecurity awareness training or education you've got. You're not going to notice that if you're going through 200 emails a day. You're not going to notice that there's not a dot above an I if you're checking email on a cell phone. You're not going to see that, period. It's got nothing to do with education. So, it's to me, it's almost gotten to be a false narrative about the importance of education. If you're trying,
that's a punch in the nose to advice, but I'm with you on it. They're just too sophisticated, as you just
and you're not going to educate your customers. You're not. If you're relying on customer education to stop fraud, you're going to lose that game. I promise you that.
Yeah. And then you don't just lose on the monetary side. You lose on the reputational side. You lose the client. It could be 5 or 10 times more expensive to try to hire to acquire a new customer as it is to retain one. Right.
Exactly.
So we know that.
It was the Under Armour CEO that said, trust is gained in droplets, but it's lost in buckets.
How about that? Yeah.
When you get hit with a breach, man, that's it right there.
Yeah, we see the statistics. Yeah, yeah, and kind of getting back to the costs, right? $4.41. The margin, you can't make those kind of margins up on other products in a financial institution. You're not getting those type of returns.
Right.
So why would you ignore it? from a balance sheet perspective on the back end if you can affect it and do something about it. I think we've bridged that gap today. I think FIs are painfully experiencing that now and know that they're working so hard in today's current economic environment to be able to acquire customers, acquire deposits,
Right.
try to get loans out the door, to produce a little income, rise above the competing financial institution spectrum they have with consumers today. Not having to have a proprietary branch down the street doesn't matter to them. They can work with any fine or reputable institution globally.
Exactly.
So they have to be aware of the financial impact and reputational risk that goes along with that, because to your point in the Under Armour quote, that goes out in buckets. It's really interesting. Do you think you talk a lot about these networks, and I'm just so curious. There's got to be a certain amount of funding that goes behind the collaboration and the collective support of these networks. Do you have any insight on how those things are being funded and self-supported in their construct?
So, I'm very lucky. This legal career of mine, I get to meet a lot of really good, really knowledgeable people. I'm talking to one right now, but I met just a few months ago. I met Frank LaRose. He's Secretary of State for the state of Ohio, and he really is big on cybersecurity, of doing things right. And I'm really impressed with the way that his office runs their elections, runs cybersecurity as a whole. And he got to talking about, when you're doing credit card theft, when you're buying or funding credit card theft online, or even buying marijuana online or ecstasy or whatever those drugs are, what you're helping to fund is not just some kid in their mom's basement committing fraud. You're really helping to fund terrorism. You're helping to fund human trafficking. There's a whole host of much darker, more violent types of crimes that are out there that's being funded and through these types of fraud. When I went to prison, we did not see the amount of drug trafficking online that we see now. All right. It was in the backs of people's minds, probably somebody could start to sell drugs online. And we dove into that a little bit at the tail end of Shadow Crew before it got shut down. But these days, drug trafficking online really eclipses fraud online. I mean, it's ubiquitous. And when I got to prison, the people who were serving time for drug conspiracies, for slinging dope on street corners, they always wanted to know, well, how would that work in an online environment? And over the years, they've found out how that works in an online environment. It's not only more profitable to sell drugs online, it's safer for a criminal to do that. So you add all that together, and you're wondering how these things are funded. Well, they're funded through. When I was involved, we had the Ukrainian mob that was involved with us. But these days, you've got Mexican cartels, you've got all forms of mafia across the planet that are involved in every single facet of cybercrime that's out there. So, it's not difficult to see how these things are funded. And then you add in, like I talk about Telegram a lot. Telegram, the fraudsters on Telegram, they've typically, as a means of payment, they've used Chime, they've used Cash App, services like that. That's changing now, because at the beginning of this year, Telegram has its own blockchain now. So if you've got a blockchain that is owned by, it operates on a network that does not answer any subpoena requests at all of a sudden you start to see a brand new payment method for criminals to use to pay each other. And Telegram is not just, when you talk about the types of crime that take place on Telegram, it's not just credit cards, identity theft, and financial cybercrime. It's human trafficking, it's drug trafficking, it's all this other stuff that's involved as well. So now you're starting to talk about opening up a brand new payment type of form where criminals can potentially never be identified and still profit and succeed wildly. So I think that I think that we have a true day of reckoning in front of us with a lot of the stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah. I'm wondering from from a consulting standpoint today, how much of your time is spent working on consulting with government agencies versus private entities, that kind of thing. Tell me a little bit about where you're applying your breadth of knowledge and expertise.
Well, you know my history, man. You know that I was arrested by the United States Secret Service initially, and I was the guy that screwed them over by committing crime inside of the Secret Service offices for about a year. I am humbled and beyond grateful that it looks like I'm going to be able to start working with some of the Secret Service people now to help train and educate on a lot of the different aspects of cybercrime. I actually had a call with the deputy so-and-so of education for the Secret Service, and it looks like I'm going to be able to start doing that. So, that's one organization I'm just getting ready to start with. I work with the FBI on a regular basis. I work with not local but state law enforcement agencies as well. My thing is, I like to make money, but if it's a university, if it's anything that's law enforcement related, I don't believe in charging for that, because those people, I went to Quantico. The first time I went to Quantico, I got to see the best and brightest minds in the United States that had given up those lucrative careers to do the right damn thing. That's what they were there for. They were there because they wanted to help their fellow human being. And it was a shock to me, because most of my life had been spent making money, stealing money. That's what I was worried about. So, being able to assist with education, universities, or with law enforcement, with investigations, or just trying to talk about how these environments work and getting agents to understand how that works, that means more to me than any amount of money I could possibly make.
Yeah, well, I guess that comes into the redemption piece that that I've heard you reference and has been voiced. You're a wealth of knowledge, certainly, great value to so many different industries today on that side. We had the privilege sometime back of reuniting with one of your former colleagues at the FBI, John Schwartz.
Yeah.
John Schwartz, now retired and doing a great job.
John's great, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
In really championing the fight against elder abuse with his not-for-profit. We did a show, had a chance to reunite there. So very commendable amount of time and expertise that you have contributed to so many different industries. It's always a pleasure to be able to bring it back and talk to colleagues. I'm going to kind of close by telling the FI clients of ours and that might be listening, to follow what they can of the information that you've provided. Hey, maybe we can have you back again at another conference in the future. That would be exciting.
Yes.
We've been talking about that. Always fun to get up to Vail, Colorado.
Oh man, ain't it though?
Yeah. Anyway, Brett Johnson, thanks for taking time. Great to reconnect. And I see now you've got newfound allegiance to Ohio State. I think last time I saw you, it might have been an Alabama hat. I don't know.
Well, now, let's not go ahead and co-sign me off on Ohio State yet. I've just got a variety of hats that I wear. I've got right now on my desk. I've got the old UK hat too.
All right. Well, I'm wondering, we're sitting here in Denver, Colorado. If we need to get some Colorado representation,
I think I need a Colorado hat. I really do.
You'll have to send me your current address. We'll take care of that for you. Brett Johnson, pleasure.
Take care, Sam. Love you, man.
Yeah, you as well.
Learn more about the ToolCase suite of real-time AI products and how to protect your institution from fraud today.